And then at the end we've got to stop it. I sometimes forget, leave it on and it gets too big. Okay, yeah, you can shoot.
Okay, so just open the scheduler project, and in there we can see we've got a ServiceNow integration service. These services basically have a single entry point called execute service, so all of those scheduler services work the same and have standard parameters. But you can see all of this one does is creates ServiceNow integration.cmdb object, and it calls execute integration.
To say that again, what does what?
Creates a reference to the CMDB object, and it calls execute integration.
Okay, so that execute integration is in which class of the
CMDB one, like you can see here.
Oh, there we go.
CMDB.
Yeah, you've already declared so when you create the object, obviously it's always to a class. Cool.
Yeah, you can't create a base. I mean, you can't create a namespace object. It has to be a class.
Has to be obvious. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And that's all the service does, so that's very basic.
Nothing else.
That's what this calls that, because that's all it needs to do. That does all the integration.
The parameters, Bjorn?
What about the parameters?
Is there anything we need to know, anything special that's going on there? I know it's just a provider and database connection.
Class is a reference to the data provider and the database info, which is the things that are passed to this, so it knows which database to connect to and everything.
Okay, cool.
What passed it, those database objects?
The scheduler.
And then where do you set the, is that the application database, hey?
Yeah.
So it will be, in our context, the scheduler will be running, because one scheduler does one scheduler program handle multiple applications on our. Okay,
Why
so.
Passes the which database is talking to, yeah.
And is that done in the setup when you set up your tasks in the scheduler? Hey,
scheduler setup, yeah.
Okay, so I'll show you where that's done, Neil. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Shade. Not in the right place.
Okay, so the first thing to note about the integration is we have a lot of service references, because the way the integration works in ServiceNow, each table creates a web service, and then you can use that web service to integrate directly into that table.
Oh, okay. So where do you get these references from? Do you download them from them and then?
Yeah. So if you go to properties on here, configure service reference. Sorry, then you can see what it's pointing to here. So basically, each table. Let me just show you in ServiceNow what it looks like.
So it's looking for a single sign-on stuff there.
Yeah.
So what did you overwrite there? The bypassing single sign-on?
Yeah, so if you go to login.do, it goes directly to the login page. Normally. I don't know why this is taking so long. Hello.
Did you paste that in now?
No, it's just going, it's still busy loading. I don't know, the system's gone very slow, yeah. Okay, but anyway, it's a thing.
So how did you type that in? Did you just type it in?
This is the table name. So every single
just
table
highlight
name
it,
in the system
just
is
keep
got.
it there. Just keep it there so I can take a screen down. Save us some time finding the correct points. I'm going to be pasting my ass off after this. Okay, all the cutting. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so every table in the service now, you can access the table directly by going to this page.
Mm-hmm.
If you use the navigation, you'll see it in there as well, but I don't need to go into that too much.
Mm-hmm.
There's also another interface, which is the list. So if you go CMDBCI list, then it will go to the list interface for that page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then just go back to the table. Then if I want to go to the web service, I just do a question mark WSDL, and then that accesses the web service.
There's a mistake halfway down there.
Yeah, it's that one.
Yeah, it's that one.
So if you want to add a service, you just copy this link with the WSDL on it.
Yeah, so there's one extra option you set on there, which I'm going to talk about, which is this option called element form default equals qualified, and you have to specify that parameter if you want to link it into .NET. Otherwise, it doesn't create the classes properly.
So when you create this thing for the first time, how do you go about it?
Is that what you say add service reference,
mm-hmm.
and then you put in the address, which is your table or whatever.
So where did you get that? Oh, you don't do the whole thing. Where did you get that whole string that you've put in there?
I just generated it. I went to their system. Where's it gone now?
You didn't close it, hey?
I said, give me that web service, and I went to WSDL, and then I just added on that one parameter.
And what's that parameter that you added on? Can you explain it, what it is?
It generates a WSDL in a different way, so that this element form default, I can't remember exactly what the element form default does, but it just creates it so that it links it properly changes the format of the WSDL slightly so that it can create the classes automatically in .NET. Because .NET basically reads this thing and then goes and creates a class for you so you can interface with it.
Yeah, on the fly, hey?
Yeah, so this is the link that I got from their system, and then I go in here, and that's what I pasted in here. And then you say go, and then it will tell you it needs to authenticate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to log in. And then it tells you this at like 10 times, because it wants to.
So Bjorn, before you continue, so to get the correct web reference, you go to the table, you go to the link, the dev link first, and you go to that specific table, and then you type in the WSDL link to see that it's the right web service link. And then you
Yeah.
add the qualified, and then if it displays that page, you know that it will definitely connect to the right web service.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got all of the references now to the dev system. So when we release, do we have to recreate all of these references?
No, that's why I have the function in there called initialize something, web service and data provider initialize or whatever. I don't know, there's an initialize function in it. It goes and links it to the right system. So you don't need to relink it over time.
Oh, cool. And does that actually then go into these references and adapt something in them?
Well, it doesn't change the reference, it just changes the URL that it's pointing to.
Okay, so these references are quite complex, aren't they, compared to the old days when you just had a DLL, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like recognized all of the different operations you could do on there and everything.
Mm-hmm. And what does that discover do?
Let's we'll try find. There we go. Try finds random ones that are like linked on your computer.
What do you mean random ones that are linked?
It finds like some. I don't know.
I see.
I've seen it find ones that like are running in debug mode.
So it changed our context totally.
Yeah, it just tries to find some web service that it has access to.
It just said
it'll never find this automatically.
Never, because it's behind too many hidden stuff. So, so does anyone know? I know you know, Bien, but does anyone know in a web service what that WSDL does? Anyone other than Bien? Not. No. So that WDSL is like Web Service Description Language. I don't know what the DL stands for, and it's just the methodology they use to discover what methods there are, because the machines that the program that the sort of the SOAP interface, if it is SOAP,
WSL SOAP.
Yeah, it depends on that language reporting back properly for the two things to communicate. Because if you can think, you normally link it through a DLL that's on your file or that you've downloaded or anything. So all of that's now absent. So the SOAP and that WSDL is the method to get all of that stuff from a remote system as opposed to referencing your DLL. Neil, do you know how the referencing of a DLL works on your computer? Do you know what's actually happening there when you do that? When you add a reference in over here? Not really. You sort of know, but not really. Angela, do you know?
Not really, no. I just know we need to reference it, but I don't know how it works behind the scenes.
Okay, so when you put a reference there, you actually making the program that you're working talk to another program. So DLL is a program, okay? It's a standalone program. And if you want to talk to another program, the two programs have to know where to find each other, and they need to have a method to talk to each other, an interface to talk to each other, okay? So when you register it there, it's telling the IDE all about its interfaces, what it's got, what hasn't it got, and how it will talk to it. So there are different sort of, if you can imagine, you can have many different types of DLL. So if you put the wrong type that doesn't support your program space, it will raise an error and say, I can't read this DLL. You've just loaded shit in here for me. I don't recognize it, okay? But we obviously have just given you ones that it recognizes. So when you put it in there, this IDE will go and examine all of your namespaces. Now, do you know what a namespace is? Okay, let's just say all your methods. Let's just say all your methods on it. It will go and get it there. And it will also need to know what are the parameters and things that you know. So basically, the name of the method and the parameters and the the types of parameters, like is it a string, is it a key, that is all part of knowing how to talk to this thing. So when you say at the top that I'm using this thing, like system.data.SQL client, it's already done that work. It knows what that thing can handle. So when you, the IntelliSense and everything can give it to you that. But even if you didn't have IntelliSense, if you put rubbish in there, like you say cmdb._ci. something that it doesn't have, because we can see it's got delete multiple, delete records. It's got all. If you put something else there, and you don't, it will show an error. So because this IDE is very rich, it'll show it to you while you're typing. But if you can create programs in a normal text editor, but then when you try and compile it, it will fall over, because during compilation it has to check that it can interface properly to those references. So that's why you have the reference there to say, where is this program sitting and how do I talk to it? Are you guys 100% clear on that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple, isn't it? What's happening in the background is complex, but so now because we don't have that DLL, and the DLL is written in a way so that when this machine looks at it, it can analyze, it finds all the methods. I mean, it knows what to expect, so it'll find all your methods and it'll find what variable types the methods needs. So that's exactly what the WSDL thing does. It's a remote way of getting all of that information and binding it to your project. That's all. And you sort go and strip that information out and bind it in your reference. So does that clear the mystery up in terms of the technology?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good. Okay, thanks, Ben. You can carry on.
Okay, and then you've got to give it a name. This is basically how you refer to it in your project, but I just gave it, obviously, for all of these, I just used the same name as the table so that we know what the hell we're doing in our code. Because if you call it something else, then it gets very confusing.
No, that's nice. I didn't even know how that worked in real life. I didn't know. I didn't know the theory. Cool.
So then once you attach it like that, then you get this service reference like that, and then you can, in your project, you can go cmdb_ci, and then you can like access it like an object.
Okay, did you already say that you're using it somewhere, or is it
No,
you have to?
It's included in your project now, so you can use.
Okay, so that's what that service reference is, that little cloud with the rain meter. So when you put it there, it's automatically part of your in your project, because normally if you add under your reference drop down, it's not automatic. You still got to go and include it. Hey?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you guys see the difference between that little service reference icon, that cloud?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you all ever wonder what it does?
We knew what the surface references were, but before they didn't have that cloud icon.
Yeah, it's new.
Nothing pretty.
Yeah. And just close it. Let's see if it's got the normal references underneath it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
There's the other one. Yeah.
It used to be in there.
Is it?
There was called something else. It wasn't. It was never combined though.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, it was a folder. It was a folder icon.
Yeah, it was like it looked different. I think it was below the normal references before as well. But anyway, whatever. It does the same thing still.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's carry on.
Okay. So just show you here we can create like an insert object now. This is based off our web service. So, but I'll show you how those objects all fit together when we get a bit further on.
Mm-hmm. Neat.
Okay, then the first thing I'm doing is just creating a connection to the data provider. So the reason there's an if here is because if you're calling it directly, then I want to go and initialize the data provider. So that's what this function does. The data provider is also a web service. This is that data provider web service that we use.
Ian, can you make your text a bit wider so I don't see all the dead space on the solution? There we go. There's data provider at the top. And so can you just give us a quick talk through on the on your opening parameters, Boolean, bulk, export folder, and all of that. Yeah.
Okay, so the bulk option, I don't know, we only used that in the initial one. So if you say bulk, then it will actually export it into Excel for like bulk import. And remember, we wanted to run a bulk one first, and then with other integrations afterwards. So I put the bulk option in up front and really use it. It can be removed at some stage.
Yeah, that's fine.
Export folder works with bulk. So if you say bulk, then you have to tell it which folder you want to export it into.
Okay, so that's why it's passing it on there. So the first two parameters are basic just for the bulk. Okay, so that is something that, and just let's see above there, is that documented already in here? Just scroll up. Yeah. So the export folder used for the bulk upload, the database. Okay, so and then right at the top is the VBN bulk, but that's not documented.
It is. It's just got like weird stuff under it.
Oh, it's just used multiple lines, or what then? What's happening?
Yeah.
But Neil, you'll fix that up, eh?
GhostDoc does like weird stuff in there sometimes. If you check the bold correctly, though, it's just like that.
How did you do that?
How
did you get that pop-up coming up?
You go to GhostDoc and then document this.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it does it.
But if you push like any carriage return in there, then it will like create these like paragraph tags around the stuff. That's what it's put in here.
Okay.
That generates into the documentation correctly still. It just looks funny when you're reading it here.
Yeah, because param and para is so close. But
yeah, it looks like the same thing. It's a bit confusing.
So Neil, this is where you're going to be putting your documentation in. You're going to be looking at all of this this wording and fixing it if it's not clear. So it must be clear to you and grammatically correct for you. Okay. So that if we need to don't understand it, then we'll come to you and say, look, can we have some of your time and understand what's going on here. Okay. So you don't have to think about it being understandable to anyone else at this stage. If I work through it with you, I might just, say, look, let's word it this way, let's word it that way, But good. So then the next thing is, why do we use dictionary like that in the parameters? Because you need a dictionary string.
Because that's how the database info is passed from the scheduler.
And what is this dictionary stuff? What does it mean?
Key value collection.
Okay, so key value collection is like what JSON and these things use. You got a key and you got a value. You got a key and a value.
Yeah.
So what is different about this key value collection?
So it's C#. That's what they use.
Okay.
Dictionary.
Okay, so dictionary is a .NET concept of key and value.
Like value. I mean, the key value can be anything in here. So it can be like int string or like a string object or whatever. Like so it's just like a list. So the key value, you have to specify the type, which is why it's got this weird string thing.
Okay, so so that database information is basically connection information. Hey.
Yeah.
Are we saying like the key will be you're using your server name, your
server name, database name, username, and all of that stuff.
All the stuff it needs, and is that the easiest way to do it in .NET?
Yeah.
Okay, so have you always used that, or is it something new you implemented?
I use them all the time because if you're doing like here, we're using app settings. This is the same as web.config where you got app settings and you create these things. This will be this on the server side, or when you use it, it will translate to the same as this. It creates a dictionary strings. It creates the same key value collection.
Okay.
So we use those all over the place.
Okay, and it's very, very flexible, so it's quite nice.
Yeah.
And then the last one, the object v object data provider, is that a reference to a web client, web service?
Yeah. So when we're using the scheduler, we already have the database info and an existing web service that we want to use for accessing the data.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're passing it from here. But if we call this directly, and we see these things are like optional parameters. If these things are null, then it will initialize its own data provider. It will create its own data provider using whatever system settings you're using.
So if you're calling it from the portal.
So yeah, like for instance, from my test application here. Just going here. See where it, yeah, you see it calls execute integration, but it's not passing any of that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will create a new data provider and it will use the settings that I have in my test project here to connect to the database.
So when we call it from the portal, how will it get?
Well, if you call this from the portal, it will do the same thing, and then it will get the settings from app.config.
In the portal.
Config. Yeah.
Okay, so each environment is responsible for our side of the database. So if it's the CMD, if it's the scheduler knows where our database is, basically.
Yeah, that's why it's passing it. Otherwise,
the portal has got it in the portal web.config, and the application would have an application.config with it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then. How does it, and then the destination information is sitting in the URL, in the service references, that web service reference.
Destination?
Like the ServiceNow database that we're going to hit, or web service.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to that yet.
Yeah, that's that, but that is sitting in the service reference. Okay, well, let's carry on. Yeah.
Sorry, Bjorn. I wanted to ask on your parameters. Where you said, for example, object data provider equals null. Well, it only said it's a null if you haven't passed anything.
Yeah, so that's how you do optional parameters. So if you,
okay.
That means you just don't have to pass it, and then it will set a default value if you don't pass it.
Okay, I see. Okay, no, I get that now. That
makes a lot of sense. You used to have a word optional and that.
Yeah. Now you just, if you give it a default, it means it's optional. Okay. And then if you see here, like I'm just passing one parameter because the rest are actually optional. So you can see
okay, so you don't have to
parameters, but you
don't have to pass now.
Okay, that makes so much sense now.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, and then yeah, the nice thing with these app settings is you can just call this configuration manager to app settings and get the settings. And then if I'm in this test project, I've like set them in here, or if I'm in a web service, I set them in my web.config or wherever, and it still like uses the same thing to go get the settings, which is why I like using those things.
Yeah, they're brilliant, man. If you're just going to look at that, this is going to take us back to that code. I just want to show them clearly. Do you guys see that big green configuration manager?
Yeah.
That I don't know which class is giving it to us, which includes
system.configuration.
Yes, that's it. You even got a system.configuration, and it's available in every C#, probably VB as well.
Yeah, it's a .NET library, so it's available everywhere.
Yeah, so in every web application it's called web.config, and I think in the application it's called app.config. And when you, even if you ask for an empty project, you still get those things. Okay, so all your parameters you're just going to put in there. And have you got it open at the moment? Did you open that parameter file for us? Yeah, there it is, top left. Just go there again. So there you can see it goes, but you have to follow that configuration app settings, okay? And then you have to have your keys and your values written like that. And is this XML format?
Yeah.
And
when you load your project, it converts this, like, yeah, reads this thing and then creates that config object for you.
Yeah. So I mean, and then that password is encrypted, so that you'll show us how to work. And then what is that? So we got the app settings. What is startup used for? We don't use it, hey?
Oh no, that's add it there itself.
So when you create an empty thing, that's going to be the minimum that's in
That
it.
was
eh?
already in there, and I just added these app settings.
Okay, cool.
There's the only confusing thing with these config files is they like multi-use. There's some like system automated things in there and then manual things. So it can get messy if you do a lot of stuff with it.
Mm. But remember I gave you guys all that little test to do? Now we did it. You'll see there's a startup app.config in there as well, and that it added for you. And all it's got in there is the startup thing.
Yeah.
Do you guys
So
see it?
Ian, would that configuration manager then get like all the information from that app settings tag that we created?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so convenient because it just turns it into a little database for you that's right there. And can you imagine if you had to go and open that file yourself and then find that stuff? It's painful.
You know, then like you don't know which project you're in. And like if you're calling it from a web service, you'll have to try one way. If you're calling it from a Windows application, you'll probably have to define it from a different place. It's like it's just a very convenient place to have it, and all projects have it, so it's accessible.
And just go and show us where it's include.
Yeah.
Where your include statement is for it. It should be at the top.
Using
oh yes.
Using and not include. Using.
VB it was still called include.
Yeah. There you go.
The system configuration, yeah. But if you hover over it, it tells you as well which one it's in. You can see the
yes.
full there.
Okay, just hover there now, like guys. You see that? It's that using is using a class. I call them namespaces. That's wrong. They're classes. Okay.
Oh, so the system is actually system configuration is actually a namespace. So you can see that the white there is the namespace, and then the green is the class.
Yeah. So the thing that you're using is the namespace, but then you use a class in it. That's right. So it was. So system configuration is it. So
and all the using does is make it so you don't have to type the whole thing out the whole time. And
can you get the IntelliSense to pop up somewhere on this thing? Like just do a new space behind it. I want the IntelliSense to jump up after configuration manager. Or is there no IntelliSense after configuration manager?
This.
There we go. Yeah. So you can either use app settings, connection strings. What would that be for?
Yeah, you can store connection strings in your config file as well.
Oh, so if you do a certain way,
then you'd have like a whole connection string in there. It's pretty crappy.
Yeah,
it's hard to read.
And it looks like it allows you can get an entire section, and then it probably puts it into another value, another key value pair set. Hey?
Yeah.
If you use the get one.
Yeah, so you can have different sections in there and stuff, and you can get like a whole section, and it'll create a whole. But we don't really use sections much because we don't have that many settings.
Okay, cool. So do you guys get the idea that behind every one of these is a whole set of more stuff?
Yeah.
And then depending on how much of that you deep dive in your own time, how much you're going to be a better programmer. Okay. Cool. And you have to know what to learn and what you're never going to use. So, but if you read through something once, you'll be surprised. When you need it, you're going to remember. Oh, it's over there. I've seen something like that. I can just leverage that functionality. Otherwise, can you imagine there's something there, and you've gone and write all of the code to go, and you put your own little file there. You put all of the text stuff in there, and you read it, and then somebody says to you, "But why didn't you use app.config?" And you look like a twat. Okay. Cool.
Okay, then the rest of this function is really just how this is what you're asking about connecting to a web service. So the data provider web service is specified in the URL specified in the settings, and then when you create a new basically so you create a new data provider client. So the object is called data provider, but when you connect it as a web service, it creates a data provider client class, and the client is the thing you connect to the web service. So it's always called something client, which is quite annoying, but that's just how it works.
So look, I'm a bit lost. So let's go back up where it says string web service. That string we got from the configurator manager.
Yeah, so here I'll tell it I want to use this data provider. This is the one on.
Oh, that's the data provider. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so I'm not talking about theirs yet because theirs will do a similar thing, but there's more settings I'd add to that.
That's our side of things.
Yeah, it's still our data provider, which I'm using to connect to our database.
Okay, that's fine, sure.
Okay, so when you create a new data provider, you can pass it two settings. The first thing is a binding, which is really just like configuration options. And there's an endpoint address, which is the address to the URL. So you can't just pass it the URL string. You've got to actually create an endpoint address object, which is quite silly, but anyway. There's probably more settings and things you can set in there. And then the main thing is to set this is the transport mode, so this is telling you to use HTTPS. And then all of this is just things to tell it to allow lots of data to be transferred through it, because by default it will time out, or it will fall over if you give it more than 10k of data or something.
Okay, so is this all in bytes?
Yeah.
Okay, so how many bytes is this? It's hard to read.
It's enough.
Okay. So you never touch these now. You sort of standardize on these.
Yeah, I mean, I set these for the first time I used a web service, and then I stopped messing with these because just everywhere.
This works.
You can read at each one if you want to see what it does in depth, but
sure. So you got
to make it not time out very clean and to allow lots of data. So when you transfer a data table, it doesn't fall over.
So we basically, our base class here, or base our namespace here is system.service model.
Where's it? Oh, there.
Yeah.
Go up a bit.
The binding is all part of this system-to-service model.
So why do they call it that? What is the service model namespace? Is that to speak to use web services?
Yeah.
And it's only for web services?
As far as I know. Anything I've used it for.
That would have been nice if they could call it web services.
Yeah.
Do they use web services in their terminology as well? I think they do.
Oh, let's just see what they. Let's call it a service now.
Okay, just a service.
Yeah.
Okay, so how come you include your namespace here? Don't you have a using over here, in here?
No, I haven't done a using on this one. Can if you want to.
Okay, so that's all that will be. So you see, guys, you don't even need to have a using in here if you do the fully qualified namespace .that, but it has to be your references. Okay.
If it doesn't recognize it, and you go to the auto resolve thing, you can see it says can you say using that?
Do you know? Just hang on. Just stop right there. Can you see that auto? Oh, damn! He didn't stop right there. Do you see that one on the right? It's saying to you how it can fix it.
Yes.
So all of these are fixes, but you have to choose the right one and go back up.
You can say either using or you can do the full name. So that's basically the two options, yeah. And then going to generate, because it'll just do some random stuff for you.
Well, it won't do random stuff. It's going to go and create a whole bloody class.
Create a new class for you, and with a blank class for you to use.
Yes, which is not what you want.
Not what you want.
But also, if you go up one there, it even shows you where it's going to put it at the top. You see how nice it is. It shows it in. I'm going to put it in here for you if you click on me. So that is pretty cool. Have you guys picked that up before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, I'm just going to leave it on that for now because I don't need it using. Okay, so where was I?
We were just talking about that namespace, getting to understand that web service is related with that namespace, So I think what we need to do, guys, is document in one area. I'll document for you all of the stuff on web services. I mean, and then I'll have BN review it and see if there's other tricky stuff we do. And I think, again, like a test project on web services will be of order.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we can see after all of that, all we have is a reference to our data provider web service. So the next thing I do is go and get
How did you get here?
options. Hmm?
How did we get here now? How did we get here? Is that the top thing that you called?
Yeah,
Is
this is
that
the first thing we called. This is the execute integration.
But okay, now I'm a bit lost. I thought.
We went from here to the shared CS where it created the.
Oh, okay. And now you
And
called.
back.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. How did we get to the shared one though? What function took us there? Oh, there we go. Cool, man. Mm.
Okay.
What does that else do there?
So this is what I was telling you. If the data provider is passed from the scheduler, then it uses this one, which really just returns. Let's just go in there. So it's got an existing data provider client, so it just goes and what does it do with it? Oh, it goes and initializes. It gets the URL from that one and reinitializes it. There's any difference here.
So it's more of a reinitializing with what it's got in it already.
Yeah.
So you must have found
using these database settings that are passed from the scheduler instead of using your web.config settings.
Could you have used it as is or not?
What do you mean?
So what are you returning here?
You return the same thing. Still return
What
the
is
data
it?
provider client. Reference to your data provider web service.
Okay, so both of them need to send that object back.
Yeah, they still both return the same thing. It's just the way that it initializes it's different because the one has database settings that are passed to it, and then the URL's passed to it uses the URL passed to it via the data provider client.
Okay, I see. Cool. Okay.
Just the way it initializes, it's a little different. But then at the end of the day, you've got your data provider object, database settings in this shared object as well.
Where do we declare that object data provider?
This one,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where is that? Data provider client. So what part of what namespace is that thing?
In the CMDB class.
Oh, and it's
It can be used across the whole class once you've initialized it. And so from all the other functions you see, you just call it, so you don't have to go and pass it everywhere.
So what is that object though?
The data provider client.
So we have to go to that's a class that's created where data provider client.
The web service
It's in our web service.
its service reference is data provider. Well, created a service reference to data provider, and that creates the data provider class, data provider client class.
And that is one of our tier objects, eh?
Yeah.
So you, what did you used to call them? Frame objects, okay? But platform objects. You guys, I'll have to give you background information. So we've got a couple of objects that is part of the platform. The application uses them a lot, and the other ones, like the portal uses it not that much, not the whole stack, I think, but I'm not too sure. We'll have to figure it out. So BN, and they're not all the real objects, the full functional objects are not web services. They are just DLLs, okay? And so they're obviously only available to server-side script. So this BN then decided to put this data provider into a web service. And then since you got it in a web service, you're using it where you can, hey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in things like the scheduler and that, it has to use the web service because there's no direct link to the database.
From scheduler?
Yeah.
No, it does. It can get you
The scheduler that's running on the application server at CCBA has no direct link to the database.
Is that where it's running?
Well, they run all over the place, but that's just an example.
Okay. So that's why you so if by using this web service, you're making it more distributable, basically.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and the new ones, I would generally use the web service anyway where you can.
Because if you use the DLL, it's got to run on a IIS machine that's that's bound to our database. It's got a tight connection to our database.
Yeah.
And cool. So by doing it this way, then where this code executes, it doesn't need to have a tight database with our database, or obviously with ServiceNow. So you can run this in the middle ground. Does that make sense to you guys? That if you use a DLL on our side, you have to be tight onto, in our domain.
Yeah.
So that it can access that database. But if you use a web service, you can call it from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. That's interesting. So the only thing I don't truly understand, no, I do. So that data provider, it picked it up. So because we have that reference, it picked it up. If you hover over it, will it tell it to you that it's part of that thing?
Yeah, you see it says it's part of this project because when you add a service reference, that's what it does. It creates a class in this project.
Okay, so
use data provider client.
Yeah, so that data provider is our namespace, but it's just
data provider is the service reference, and then data provider clients the thing it creates, the class it creates within there.
Yeah, and the ServiceNow integration, that's the namespace of this whole project. Okay.
Yeah, so it's the project's namespace you can see there.
Cool. Okay, so now that was a mystery to me. When I see this green stuff, I don't always know where it's coming from. And I find once I know where the stuff is coming from, a lot makes it more clearer.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot more clear, yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay, let's get back into that. Executes. Okay, so that's the data provider. So then the first thing it's doing now is getting the integration options that we'll get from the database. We can go look how that works. A lot of things will work the same way.
What's that shared?
There's a shared class in here.
Okay.
That I use for code that I use across all the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's ticket integration or whatever, it'll still do integration options get.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we're doing here, we're generating a SQL statement. Then we call data table get on the data provider.
Mm-hmm.
And you pass it the SQL string and the database info object, which is that dictionary thing you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Oh, so you just pass it the whole dictionary, and then it does a whole. It'll set up.
This will then go and create a connection to the right database and get the data from the table and return it. Yeah.
And that's not expensive to open and close that connection. Oh, your mic has stopped. Look, I'm just going to go and just put the thing on. Yeah, just pause. I'm just going to stop the background music. Okay.
And I'm enjoying it.
Okay. Well, we'll pipe it to you. You pause.